Hello, good afternoon to everybody. It's a pleasure to host and to be moderator of this panel. I would like to thank all of you to joining us today, either in person, but we also have virtually, we're gonna have a discussion on the strategic capacity building priorities for a more sustainable, resilient, and inclusive Caribbean economies. We are today in honor of the 20th anniversary of our Caribbean Technical Assistance Center in Barbados, the CARTAC. We are grateful to Barbados for hosting the center and to all our development partners, including Canada, which has been a driving force behind the creation of the center and its leading funder ever since. And we say it because Canada is part of this panel. We are joined today by four distinguished panelists. Kristalina Georgieva, Managing Director of International Monetary Fund. First Managing Director to visit the country, to visit the East Caribbean. We have Prime Minister Mia Mottley. I learned Mia Amor Mottley. I learned today, amor in the region is love, in Portuguese, Spanish, so thank you for all your love to all of us here. We have virtually Mr. Sajan, Minister of International Development Agency of Canada, who gracefully accepted our invitation, and Mr. Timothy Antoine, Governor of the East Caribbean Central Bank and Chairperson of CARTAC Steering Committee. We have around 50 minutes. So let's start with a round of questions, 5 minutes to each. And I will start with MD Kristalina Georgieva. Kristalina, what brings you, the MD, to Barbados?
What brings me to Barbados is the wonderful country, the incredible leader, Prime Minister Mia Mottley, who I am proud to say is a good friend, and the tremendous challenges that Barbados and other countries here are faced with. A crisis upon a crisis upon a crisis. Barbados and the countries here were severely hit by the pandemic. It brought the economies highly dependent on tourism to a screeching halt, bringing revenues almost down to zero, and expenditures jumping up. Now, as they have been recovering, the war in Ukraine is pushing prices of energy and food, and that comes on top of supply chain disruptions that have caused inflation to accelerate in many, many countries. What it means for this region is tightening of financial conditions, as well as appreciation of the dollar to which currencies are pegged. That would create a new wave of difficulties for policy makers, for central banks, for fiscal authorities. we have an obligation as an institution to engage on these topics honestly, to recognize that price stability is critical for growth and for macroeconomic performance, meaning for jobs for people, and therefore it ought to be a priority, but there are consequences from price stability that countries have to wrestle with. And I am confident that together we can be stronger in face of these difficulties. Last but not least, we all know that this is one of the most challenged places in the world because of climate, and where it is a matter virtually of protecting lives and livelihoods, to be strong in advocating for action everywhere, take action at home, but above all, integrate adaptation to climate change in macroeconomic policies. So we have, fortunately, a wonderful partnership with Barbados. The Prime Minister, in her first days in office, recognized that strong fundamentals are critical for the well-being of people. So we had the good fortune to put in place a program that built that macroeconomic strength. So when the crisis hit, Barbados was better protected. We also have stepped up immediately support for the countries through emergency financing. I want to recognize the members of our executive board, Mr. Bevilacqua and Mr. Jennings in this room. He wasn't at that time with us, but Mr. Bevilacqua was, for swiftly enabling the fund to provide much needed liquidity to our members, and also to help us with the historic $650 billion special drawing rights allocation. Now, what brings me here is also the relentless pursuit of innovation, so we can build strength, we can build resilience. And tomorrow we will have the good opportunity to discuss one of these innovations, the Resilience and Sustainability Trust that the Prime Minister actively lobbied for, based on lending of special drawing rights from countries that got it, don't need it, to where they would make a huge difference. None of this is possible without people that are well trained, without institutions that are performing at a high level. And this is what we are celebrating today. 20 years of engagement that builds these capabilities. And I can finish why I'm here. I'm also here to thank those who made it possible, the partners that have financed us in our work, and to thank the authorities of Barbados for being a fantastic host for our center, and those officials that have guided our work. So a very long list of reasons to be in Barbados, and only 3 days to get through my list.
It's a long, but it's a very good list of reasons. Let me get to Prime Minister Motley. Barbados has been a champion of reforms to strengthen not only the economy, but the social resilience of the country. And we are here to talk about CARTAC. And I want to ask you a little bit about what has happened, but also to talk about the future of CARTAC. on what has happened. How is CARTAC help you to promote the reforms and shape the more sustainable, resilient, and inclusive economy in the region? And the second part is, what is needed else to provide even more support going forward?
Thank you very much. I think that all of us are aware of the extent to which the presence of CARTAC over these 20 years has brought additional capacity to our countries, particularly in financial and insurance and customs-related matters. Having said that, I really want to focus on the way forward, because I believe that there is going to be a time, regrettably, in the next decade or two, when we're going to start to question what is the viable size of small states, for all kinds of reasons. But in the interim, we have to be able to build the capacity, and what we're seeing more and more in this region is a combination of factors that explain why our growth has been so anemic and why we have not performed as well as we could have. One of those is lack of capacity, and lack of capacity is real. The people who you see in this room have to do everything. They don't have the luxury of being able to focus on international relations within the Ministry of Finance, or they don't have the capacity to focus on procurement, or they don't have the capacity to focus on matters, fiscal matters, or monetary matters, or whatever. So everybody, literally, does, who is in those ministries, and it's worse in the Eastern Caribbean, I'm sure, Timothy, has to do everything. So the first thing you have is them being pulled in all the different directions. The second problem you have is that they don't have the ability, therefore, to do over and over and repeat and develop the level of expertise that comes from repetition and singular focus on issues. The third thing we have is that the reality is that it also means that our engagement for continuous training and for continuous exchanges to be innovative and on the cutting edge is compromised, because they're not literally able to have the time to focus on those other issues. So whenever we have the capacity for someone to come in and do deep dives and to be able to help us with what really needs to be done structurally to make changes, the IMF has done it for us with your technical assistance, programs with the customs, we've done it with CARTAC, we've done it with now the debt, we've done it with different areas. We absolutely need it in the region. And I say so because there are two other things that bother me about our development going forward. And it's not popular to speak about it. I did it when we had Maxine Waters and the others here, because we make assumptions for one-size-fits-all prescriptions as if it can work in small jurisdictions. We're going to have a problem soon with people willing to serve, especially in non-executive positions, because of the scale and the level of intrusiveness with respect to politically exposed persons, and I don't mean politicians, I mean people who are serving as board chair, chair of Financial Services Commission, chair of other financial regulatory and other agencies, the Barbados Revenue Agency. And why? Because of the extent to which the rules that have been made internationally are required here, and that also penalize process, breach of process, as opposed to substantive criminal activity. And what we're finding is that persons who we might otherwise want to serve, they say, no, I'm not interested, because you want my mother, my father, my sister, my brother, my child, everybody to declare. And that is going to mean that the level of expertise that is available domestically is going to shrink further. And hence the need for CARTAC to provide the technical assistance becomes even all the more important, because an already small base is continuing to shrink even further because of the unintended consequences of what should be good governance. Now, I'm a former attorney general, and I'm a former lawyer who practiced criminal law. And my view is, if you want to get at criminals, you go for criminals, but you don't spread the net so wide as to make governance impossible. And that's what the world is doing, particularly in small states, without realizing that they're doing it. With respect to other aspects in the Eastern Caribbean and Barbados, I feel that there's room for a lot more cooperation. And I feel that one of the roles that CARTAC can play as well is that it can identify those opportunities for greater functional cooperation in a way that makes them more proactive rather than reactive. And I would hope that that can happen. Let me give you a broader idea, and maybe it's a little too broad for the remit of CARTAC, but I'm sure that we can do it in the Financial Services Commission. We don't have the level of expertise in the sub-region to appropriately staff a Financial Services Commission for each country, or even for Barbados, then the OECS, then Trinidad, then Guyana, then Suriname, then Jamaica, then I can go on. We don't have the level of capacity in terms of the skill set without bringing in people to staff a fair trading commission. And in my view, once again, I go back to my days as a lawyer. When I was Attorney General, I was tasked with the responsibility of chairing the Preparatory Committee for the establishment of the Caribbean Court of Justice. Mercifully, this court has been functioning now for over, in fact, 17 years. A court that everyone thought could never and would never happen. And in fact, the first time I went to heads of government to ask for the funding for it, we asked for $60 million and they chased me out the room. And the next meeting, they approved a trust for $120 million. Why? Because we changed how we approached it. And we created a court that had double jurisdiction. It had jurisdiction as a final court of appeal of a number of countries, Guyana, Barbados, now Belize, I believe. But we created a treaty interpretation court that had regional jurisdiction. It is my view that this region needs to have, and I'd like to see an entity like CARTAC start to do the proactive work, to have a strong regional financial services commission that has both regional and national jurisdiction, a strong regional competition commission that has both national and regional jurisdiction. And why? We'll probably spend less, but we will also be able to pay the salaries that need to be paid to attract the best in the region and to allow for the level of expertise to be at the level that we really need it, rather than having persons trying hard, but really and truly not with the exposure of the range or volume of cases, and two, therefore not with the capacity to develop the experience. So I'll stop at this point, but I really feel that CARTAC has the ability to do the kind of deep dive studies that sits to the region. This is where greater functional cooperation can happen. This is how it can happen. My own experience with the heads of government system is that it won't happen that easily, especially in technical financial matters, unless it is brought up to them on a plate rather than coming down. On social matters, the heads will give you political directives to come down. But on financial matters, we can't even get COFAP to meet, which is the Council of Finance Ministers of the region, to meet. We're hoping that it will meet on the 3rd of July. We hope that we will have a quorum for it. But really and truly, the things that are affecting the quality of financial regulation and economic surveillance generally ought to be the subject of greater regional cooperation and singular cooperation. So I'll stop at this point. Thank you.
Thank you. Definitely, regional cooperation should be a CARTAC's objective, and it is a regional center, so it has to do this. And I think you are touching the right challenges and the capacities and the skills of the people, and for us, for the IMF, it's very important and gives us also a sense of purpose.
I'll just add one other thing. I really do believe that there's need for more training in, say, and capacity building within the relevant ministries of finance and departments. And perhaps, you know, our people learn well by example and by creating of habit. And perhaps the way in which we deliver the training, we need to be very careful about what we do and how we look at it. Okay?
Definitely. To have this, we need the donors. And Canada has been one of our main donors. The external partners of CARTAC are responsible for more than half of the IMF Capacity Development Fund. And Canada has been our largest partner. And we are very glad to have Mr. Sajan, Minister of International Development Agency of Canada. And besides thanking you, I would like to ask you about why Canada, how do you portray Canada's involvement in CARTAC? Why Canada is here? How is it important of CARTAC and capacity development? And what is the vision for the future? So I'm asking everybody about the past, how have you seen, and also about the vision for the future. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you for that. And I apologize I couldn't be there with you, all of you in person, and Prime Minister. It's so good to hear you speak and the passion that you continually show, not only for your country, but for the region. In Canada, I like to see ourselves as friends and not just donors, because we have a shared population. We have so many Canadians that call the many Caribbean nations their home. So, you know, we like to think ourselves as family and friends. And given also our geographic location, it makes also good sense. We have many Canadians that come to visit as well. Plus, there's also good economic business opportunities that come with that. But as also the Prime Minister stated, smaller states, island states, have unique challenges. It is difficult to have the capacity to do a lot of the work that needs to be done when it comes to whether it's commissions on the economic side, different applications that need to be submitted, and that's why CARTAC is so important. I'm a firm believer in capacity building and institution building, and what we want to do is how do we partner to build the institutions that can have that longevity, the sustainability, to help help the Caribbean nations move forward, because there's so much talent there, and that talent just needs to be given the appropriate tools, the right education, and the mentorship to be able to take advantage of the opportunities that currently exist. So that's talking about the current, but we also need to be very mindful of the challenges that are taking place. And climate is a significant challenge. I would say that island states literally sit at the epicenter of when it comes to the impact of climate change. And regrettably, you have seen the impact of climate change on many occasions. And let's not forget within the health pandemic, what COVID has done economies of island states. So we believe that island states should be looked upon differently, and hopefully there's going to be some more work that's going to go there, so that way there's we can align our support better for island states because of the uniqueness that you have, where you can have things go extremely well, but overnight one hurricane can wipe out large chunks of the economy and the impact that it has on people. So moving forward, what we want to do is look at build upon on the capacity building, and CARTAC can do that, but we're also looking at other opportunities as well. I had some very good discussions when I was at the World Bank with many of the Caribbean nations, my counterparts there. So we'll look at different opportunities and how we can move forward. What we want to do is, rather than us offering a solution, what we want to is partner with you and support your solutions. And to me, that CARTAC will be even far more successful with that approach.
Thank you very much for those words. It's all these issues on the climate challenge, on the resilience, and on the need of capacity to deal with that, and the opportunities you are looking forward. Our last speaker of the panel, Governor Antoine, you have been active in CARTAC for several years now. It's not the first time. How has been your experience working in the center, with the center over these years? How you will say the results of the CARTAC from your point of view? And what do you think should the focus be, let's say in the next 5 years, to promote prosperity among the Caribbean community?
Right, so thank you very much, Dylan. Someone once said, you know, great leaders plant trees which they never sit under. Great leaders plant trees that they never sit under. Well, I'm happy this afternoon we have the opportunity to sit under the tree that is CARTAC and look back on 20 years of success. And it's especially pleasing to be able to share that with Prime Minister Motley, who of course is our host Prime Minister, but also a regional champion on many levels. And again, Prime Minister, thank you so much for your leadership on so many fronts. The Managing Director for first visit to the Eastern Caribbean. And of course, Minister Sajan, who represents Canada, which is our largest development partner or contributor to CARTAC. So it is especially pleasing. And I do want to say this afternoon that there are many people to thank for what we've achieved over the last 20 years. Many people have planted and, of course, watered, but I want to mention two names very briefly. One, Ewart Williams, retired IMF staffer and former governor of the Central Bank of Trinidad and Tobago, and Dr. Marion Williams, former governor of the Central Bank of Barbados, who was the first chairperson, I think the longest chairperson of CARTAC. And there are many, many more people to thank. Of course, our development partners and the managing director did that. So I just want to say to you, thank you. When I was first approached about CARTAC in 2000, I was financial secretary in Grenada. And I was hopeful about what CARTAC would do, but of course, it remains to be seen. It remained to be seen. 20 years on, I can look back and say that CARTAC has indeed delivered significant development impact. So you asked me, what has been the impact? Very briefly, from where I sit, as financial secretary, now as governor, I think the first thing that comes to me is tax administration, customs administration. The reality is that CARTAC helped to set up VAT, value-added tax, in many of our countries. I know Barbados went earlier, I think 94 thereabouts, but in many of our countries, CARTAC helped to set up VAT. And we were dealing with the issue of trade liberalization and the fact that we could no longer rely on border taxes to carry the weight of the public finances. They were lower, they were fewer, we had to go broad-based. We had to introduce VAT. CARTAC played that role. Many of our countries. In addition to that, CARTAC helped set up many of the tax administrations in Inland Revenue and Customs, large payer tax unit, million. Today, every country has seen an improvement in tax collection because of CARTAC. And the managing director mentioned the example of Guyana with a 4% GDP increase. That is significant. So if you want to know about development impact, it is clear. And I want to say to Minister Sajan, this particular investment by the government and people of Canada is well worth it. You have, in fact, delivered significant impact for this region. And you should be justifiably proud about this particular investment you've made. I also want to mention financial sector supervision and stability. And one of my favorite examples is, in fact, so CARTAC helped with the establishment of non-bank regulators in many of our countries. Simple example in Grenada. One person in the Ministry of Finance, Prime Minister was talking about it earlier, one person in the Ministry of Finance was dealing with insurance supervision and non-bank supervision. And then half a person, which was yours truly as the permanent secretary, was dealing with the rest. So, you know, one full-time person. CARTAC funded a feasibility study that allowed the establishment of GARFIN in Grenada, which is today one of the most respected and effective non-bank regulators in the ECCU. That's a legacy of CARTAC. I want to give two other quick examples because my time is short. on climate resilience, which is, of course, more recent vintage, CARTAC has done some very important work. For example, after Hurricanes Irma and Maria, CARTAC worked with countries to do stress testing, and even the pandemic, which is, of course, still with us, stressing on insurers to assist them with basically recalibrating their risk management frameworks for the supervision of the insurance industry. That is another simple example. And by the way, if you're really interested, go on the website. There are many success stories of CARTAC over the last 20 years. The final one I want to mention is its impact on institutions and people. CARTAC has trained over 10,000 people in this region. And the beauty about this is not just they've contributed in real ways, and by the way, I'm a beneficiary, but also they have risen through the ranks and are now contributing at very senior levels across government and across the region. And very importantly as well is the peer learning and the exchange that has occurred. So we've moved around the countries, shared with each other, shared best knowledge, practices, experiences, and solidarity. And as a result of that, we have seen people grow. There are a few situations where people have been trained and now have become advisors, CARTAC advisors. So the students became the teachers. They call Cartacians in CARTAC speak. That is a legacy of CARTAC. So there is a lot that we can celebrate on what CARTAC has done. Pivoting quickly to the future, quickly. We surveyed our membership recently about what should you expect or what do you want to see from CARTAC for the next 5 years. And I want to celebrate the entire CARTAC team that's here, the director, Christian Jos, and the entire team. And one of the things we heard is that we have to continue to support some traditional areas. Prime Minister mentioned a few. Managing Director, you said in spring, this is the most complex policy environment facing our world. Well, if that is the case for large economies, could you imagine what we are facing as small states? Could you imagine what we are facing as small states? The shocks keep coming. The shocks keep coming. Before we can come up for air, we have to face another. So we will have to continue to work in those traditional areas. But there are some new and emerging areas. Climate is going to be huge. Digital currency. So the whole digital economy. Because with the rise of the digital economy, we have to position this region to be, and I always make this point, not merely to be producers, consumers rather, but to be producers in this digital economy. It's easy to go on the internet and click on Amazon and make a purchase. That's consumption. The question is, what are we selling on Amazon as a region? What are we selling? So we have to position ourselves. And then you ask, well, what's the role of CARTAC? CARTAC has to help with some of the enablers, but also the safeguards for the digital economy. So for example, on cybersecurity, which is so important for financial stability, CARTAC has a role to play, working with regulators to ensure we have the requisite standards on cybersecurity. That's a simple example. And if you go to the other side, there's the whole issue of financial and digital literacy to be able to actually have the skills to participate in the economy. So that is going to be a very important area. Data analytics. A lot of the challenge we have with data in the Caribbean, and they're real, could be mitigated to some extent with the appropriate deployment of data analytics and data visualization tools. And whether that is in PFM, whether that is in tax, whether that is in financial sector regulation, it cross-cuts all of the areas that CARTAC now play in. We believe that is going to be very important. And to build public support for policies and reforms that need to take place in this region. And that message cannot only be carried by our politicians. We have to give people a picture and tell a story that captures their imagination and brings a groundswell of support for the kind of structural reforms that this region needs to see. Because Prime Minister just asked about the viability of these small states going forward. If we're going to have a fighting chance, we absolutely must implement a number of these reforms, and we have to do so with great urgency. So I will close here by saying there is a lot that we can celebrate, but in this moment of time, there's a lot ahead of us, and we need CARTAC to play its role in that regard. And I want to thank everyone who supported CARTAC over these years.
I can feel your involvement. You are true Cartesian, as you say. In a moment where, as you say, we are facing shock over shock, and you're right, we cannot imagine. That's why we're here, to try to be closer to you and to help support. And the examples you gave on very clear impact the CARTAC has on tax, the VAT, the tax administration, the financial regulation, stress testing, climate changes, all of this gives very concrete imagination for all of us on the impact of CARTAC. I would like to, we are in person. I know we are also virtual, but let's take advantage that we are in a panel where there is in person. And I would like to open, if there is a question from the audience, maybe somebody wants to ask a question. Here's the microphone with Christian. He's raising his hand. I'm not sure it's for a question or to give the microphone. Yes, it's to give the microphone. So is anybody wants to use the opportunity? We have this wonderful panelist. So just, we know you, but just introduce so that everybody in the virtual world also.
Thank you. Well, Prime Minister, Managing Director, Governor, Minister, I'm Scott Fursdon-Wood. I'm the British High Commissioner to Barbados and the Eastern Caribbean. And the United Kingdom has been delighted to be a significant partner for CARTAC since its inception. And we are as proud as all of you are at the results that the last 20 years have yielded. And as we look to the future, of course, some of that feels quite uncertain for all the reasons that you've so eloquently described to us this afternoon. The region faces these interlocking, interdependent crises which, taken together, begin to look like something pretty close to an existential crisis. So I suppose my question is, given that, and given the economic outlook, which is uncertain at best, should we allow ourselves to be optimistic? And we've heard from all of you some thoughts about what the future might look like. But what are the key things that we, working together as partners, must do if the gains of the last 20 years are not only sustained, but hopefully expanded upon?
So who wants to? Kristalina, please.
These days, when people ask me about the outlook, I often come back with a story from the days of Brezhnev, interviewed about the status of the Soviet economy. And the journalist says, Mr. Comrade Brezhnev, can you tell us the status of the Soviet economy in one word? Brezhnev says, good. How about in 2 words? Not good. And the reason I'm coming up with this is because when we step back, even with this shock upon shock upon shock, we have to recognize that we do have, for this year, still the prospects of coming with globally with positive growth. It is a bit less certain about the fate of 2023 in this regard, given the tightening of financial conditions that, if it has to go even deeper, could lead to tougher outlook. And of course, I am wholeheartedly agreeing with you that what is tough for large economies is even tougher for small economies. 2022 is also, in comparison to 2020, a less advantageous year. Why? Because in 2020, there was still quite a lot of policy space for many countries to deploy. And most importantly, in 2020, both monetary policy and fiscal policy were moving in sync and in very close collaboration with each other. Monetary policy was accommodative, fiscal policy was also accommodative. Now we are at the point when monetary policy in many countries has to tighten up quite significantly to combat inflation. And at the same time, fiscal policy has much less space. It has been deployed significantly, and fiscal policy, if not deployed properly, may work against the objectives of monetary policy if it is not well targeted, if it is not prioritized. There may be on one side monetary policy tightening and on the other side fiscal policy easing, not achieving the objective of price stability fast enough. So it is a complex time, and then we have on top of it climate shocks. So what could give us optimism? What is the way forward? Well, first, remember the lesson from the global financial crisis, that if you have a banking sector that is not regulated and as a result going into a bad direction with, well, not catastrophic, but severe consequences, what do? You reform the banking sector. And we have seen in this crisis that a reformed banking sector is serving us relatively well. In other words, you make the sector more resilient to shocks in the future. What we have to do is to expand this concept of resilience to make it much more comprehensive than it used to be. And that means for us at the IMF to work with countries on the resilience of people. And here we actually do a lot to protect social spending and do a lot, including CARTAC, to build social protection systems, social safety nets that are effective, well prioritized, and deliver for the most vulnerable people. We have to expand the concept of resilience within the economies, how we think about macro and micro policies that enhance the economic resilience. Well, some of it is nothing new. We know that when we have competitive economies where private sector thrives but also pays its taxes, its fair share, that helps the resilience of countries. And of course, for all our sins of the past, we have to build a much more resilient planet. In other words, we need to move to a green economy, to a low carbon economy, to a resilient economy. So is that and the other issue that Barbados is also tackling quite effectively is inequalities. Make sure that the social fabric is strong, that communities are strong. Is this a pipe dream, something that is like idealistic but not possible? Actually, if you look at the experience of countries, those that have been ahead of the curve on building that kind of resilience, they're withstanding shocks better, they're coming on the other side stronger. If you look at the well-performing countries through this crisis, they are the countries that have absorbed these lessons early. Okay, so here is my kind of bottom line on that. My biggest worry for the world of tomorrow is whether we manage to keep together and build actually more resilience through collective action. Whether we can respond to the call of the Prime Minister that we help the countries that are small to unify their skills and capabilities for the benefit of everyone, or it is fragmented and each one is striving on its own to achieve its objectives. We as institution are incredibly proud to have 190 members and bring them to work together. And we have a huge responsibility at all levels to build this solidarity, this capacity to face challenges, not each on their own, which discriminates against small countries horribly, but in a more coordinated, in an integrated global economy that is able to face challenges together. When I look back, my own family, my parents had better life than their parents. I had better life than my parents. I am the first one to have PhD in an extended family. It's a simple dream that if I poll this room, we all share. I want my daughter to have a better life than me. And I'm not sure we can get there unless this most important objective of solving problems together we are able to achieve.
That's very, very touchy and very important. We are getting into the last minutes of the panel, so I would like to ask the other panelists to maybe 1 or 2 minutes of the concluding remarks. So, Prime Minister.
I'm not sure I'm good as Brezhnev to do it in 1 word or 2 words.
Try 3 words in this time.
Even that. Then I'd have to say thank you in 4 words. Look, this region is at a very precarious point in our post-independence history. And the cumulative impact of these triple crises is literally having the greatest impact on our social stability since independence. We can bring back down debt overnight, but we cannot restore social stability in under a generation. And it is for these reasons that we have taken to the road to make the arguments that we've been making for the last few years with respect to climate vulnerability, with respect to inequity as it related to the handling of the pandemic and the absence of global leadership, and by extension, the absence of access to too many things. We still do not have vaccines for the 5 to 11-year-olds, and that is having its impact on the elderly population, because in our culture, grandparents are who will take care of children when parents are at work. And now to be able to have it with respect to food and fuel is a good and bad thing, because at last the calls that we've been making over the years for food security are being adhered to, and people are getting serious about ensuring that every square inch of land ultimately is brought back into production horizontally, and as much square inches vertically as we can carry is equally brought into production. Similarly, with fuel, and I want to speak blankly now here, we go for regulation as we must. But then when the regulation is not effective or it takes too long, it is a drag on the economy. And right now we are facing that with respect to renewable energy and getting the regulatory framework correct. The government is going to have to make some decisions whether we continue to allow a process that is too long and too complicated and, in my view, too complex for small states as well. Whether we allow that process to continue unabated, or whether we recognize that, look, there's a crisis upon us, and if we don't intervene and try the best thing according to transparent and fair precepts to allow us to advance, then we run the risk of ending up at our destination fully paralyzed or not even alive. And these are the hard decisions that we're going to have to take, in my view, from where I sit. it is going to mean. And we said it, we saw it with the pandemic. And I've insisted that the cabinet, Minister Strawn can tell you that I've been on him like a tick, that all contracts over $1 million that we put before the Parliament so that people can see, because we will have to do more expedited procurement in order to save ourselves and to save our region and to save jobs. And we will have to do, in some instances, some broad policy directives instead of complex regulation with renewable energy in particular. We've been waiting for investments to be able to get started purely because we can't get the FTC to do and to act fast enough with respect to issues pertaining to feed-in tariffs, etc. Now, at the end of the day, when the directives come, what use is it going to be? Then you're going to hear that we've waited so long that you can't access the panels or you can't access these materials because of the supply chain disruption. I am saying that we have to go back to first principles on a lot of things. And what is the public interest we are trying to defend? What is the public mischief that we need to avoid? How does the technology help us to do it in a more efficient way? And let us be very clear, who are the people that are going to be affected negatively or discriminated against by our policy choices, and who are the people that can be empowered or enfranchised by our policy decisions. And I'm prepared to lead from in front on these issues now, because it is clear to me that you cannot play shots. For those who like cricket, you cannot play shots on a sticky wicket with the atmosphere very moist as you would play when it is dry and arid. You can't play pace the same way you play spin. And we now have to adjust our shots for this environment that regrettably is too much like the environment of a century ago. But as I said last night, with the knowledge that we do know better and we can defend the core principles of what must be defended better, but we cannot play by rote because we will end up with a lot of casualties. Thank you.
We can do better, and we will do better. We just have 1 or 2 minutes, so I will give just 1 minute to Governor Antoine, just to say.
Thank you. So my 2 words are thank you. Thank you, Prime Minister, for, I think you call it shots for shocks. So I'll keep that in mind. I'll think about that. But I just want to say thank you to our development partners, all of them. Canada, UK, EU, United States, Mexico, Netherlands, CDB, and ECCB. And let me say on ECCB, I had absolutely no reservation in committing the central bank to become a contributor to CARTAC.
Very good.
I'd seen it for 20 years. And I'm making the point now that for the new cycle, ECCB will be on board. And I'm asking all of you to stand with us as we go forward for the next period ahead of us for CARTAC.
Very good.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And last but not least, Minister Sajan, please, your concluding remarks.
Thank you. I won't be long. First of all, everything has been said by the esteemed panelists and especially the Prime Minister. The point that I would like to stress upon is that what the Prime Minister has talked about, the inequities. And I would say, how do we create inclusive growth? How do we make sure that everybody benefits from the efforts that are going to be made? And let's also use the shocks that we have all faced, and especially the smaller states when it comes to climate change, pandemic, they've had unique challenges. How do we look at these shocks as opportunities for us to do things differently? Whether it's how do we accelerate our response to climate change? How do we make sure we develop the talent that's just before us to making sure that they come up with the unique ideas to look at that long-term growth? And as Prime Minister rightly talked about, it takes generations to make that social change. So how do we invest in that talent to look at those opportunities that are there? Some opportunities that we see, and some opportunities that we don't see now, but the younger generation definitely will. But how do we take advantage of that? And CARTAC will be a really good vehicle to be able to help unleash that talent for the positive. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your support. Thank you all, and we count with your support to do better, and we will do better. Thank you. Have a good afternoon for all of you.
Thank you.